I grew up right by the railway tracks. It's called the Beach Line, just off Mountain Avenue on a street called Minigaff. We played a lot of, in the early years, non-organized sports because they weren't there. I remember playing, for instance, baseball. I did play Optimist League, but prior to that, it was basically getting all the kids in the neighborhood, forming your teams, picking a captain, and play the game. That's interesting. We had across the street from where I lived was just a big field, and the fire department used to flood it. Just pour water on an open field, and you put your skates on at home, and you walked across, and the best you could. Then we started playing at what it was known as COAC, and prior to that, the skates I had, you could pretty well fold them up and put them in your hip pocket, and played pee-wee hockey. And then I went to playground hockey, playing at Robertson Rink, and then on to there to my more organized hockey at COAC, CPAC, and also at Northwood, where we won a Bantam A provincial championship. Playing probably one of the more interesting times was during the Christmas break for the NHL. Billy Mosienko lived in our area. And we'd come over to our rink, which was the Robertson Rink, and we would play corner to corner. It's interesting, not goal to goal, but corner to corner. And there might be 30, 40, or 50 kids on the ice at the same time. But it was a survival of the fittest. So I was pretty small at that time, but still, you took your bumps and grinds and you played. Well, the first pair of shin pads I had were actually just somewhat of an imitation leather over felt. And there were like sticks in there, like ribs, and then the top was just felt. The early years was a fellow by the name of Jim. I'm just trying to think of his last name right now. And then Ors Slobodian was probably a very influential coach I had when I played juvenile hockey and midget hockey back at COAC. When we played with Northwood, actually the team was we only had 9 skaters. Buddy Parnell was our goalie at the time. Byron, he played for the Canadians. Edgar Wood at that time was considered the best midget juvenile or midget player in Manitoba. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out for him, but he was one heck of a hockey player. Sicharski, who ended up winning a scoring race in the Western Canada Hockey League, he played for the Brandon Wheat Kings eventually. Went up with players, and I played at a higher level a few games with a fellow by the name of Bobby Stoik, who also won the scoring champion when he played for the Winnipeg Rangers, and he also played for the Brandon Wheat Kings. So, yeah, there would be the various parts of the city because it was quite dense of hockey. Not like today that you may have one midget team. There was multiple teams with the Orioles, whether it's River Heights or Kelvin. Kelvin was always a big competition for us. And so on. The Norwood group, a fellow by the name of January, and again, he played in the Western Hockey League as well. Kelvin was a natural rivalry where they have Price. I remember a fellow by the name of Price, he played there. He was a very excellent hockey player, but he was small for his age at the time, but that was top notch. Or Bronx Park, there was always great competitions between us. And eventually, when I did play with Northwood, again, strong team, but we lost the provincial championship when we played in Brandon, and probably the first time we were playing in an indoor rink. It was sort of, I was younger, you never paid attention to that. It was more of an adult thing, thinking we're all from the North End, Bowell, and then I grew up with it later on, but I'm not sure. North Enders had maybe more pride in winning because they had less. But the hockey talent was spread evenly throughout the province. And I could kid you and say they're all from the North End, but I'd be kidding you, okay? Oh, yes, we played, again, COAC, which was the Canadian Ukrainian Athletic Club, it was known. It's called Sinclair Park today. And then you had the Canadian Polish Athletic Club. They're sponsored by Ukrainian groups and Polish groups and so on. And then the satellite rink, where I played my younger days, was at Robertson, right just out in the north end off McPhillips area. Volunteers put the boards up, and volunteers did all the work there, and the city finally put one of those green shacks heated with a wood stove, and you played there. In fact, as I coached hockey there later, am I going too far? Coached hockey there, and I had the luxury of having a young fellow by the name of Wayne Chernicki play for me. As I've said previously, playing indoors was an extreme novelty, but we did play in the Olympic rink, which is right on College and just off Main Street behind there. And we would play the odd game in there, especially at the juvenile age or midget age. We used to go there to watch teams play. The Canadians' home rink was there as well as the Monarchs were there. And they played on Sundays mostly, and it was always silver collection, a nickel or dime to get in to watch them play. And then you watch some great players. Kenny Saunders plays there. There was the Winnipeg Braves there, the Wakely, and fellows of that nature. It was great hockey to watch at that time. It was cold, but you know what? You didn't know any different. The rinks were cold then, but we didn't know what it was like to be in a warm rink, so you really had no comparison. So you're happy to be inside and not having snow fall on your head, okay? Probably, well, one of the first games I ever seen was at the old amphitheater rink, which is where the Great West Life building is now, just in that area, pardon me. And I remember watching the what we call the Winnipeg Blackhawks, and they played a team, I'm pretty sure it was the Brandon Kings at the time, if I remember the names right. Later on, at about 1950, 52, somewhere around there, when the Winnipeg Warriors were in town, going and watching Billy Mosianko play, and they had the Cullen brothers and Eddie Chadwick was in goal, and Kent Douglas is on defense. Ask me the players today, I can't do that. By the way, on that team, the Winnipeg Warriors, 11 players in that 1 year went up to the NHL the next year. 6 of them, I think, went to Toronto, and 5 went to Montreal, to show you the caliber of hockey that was at that time. I was the Rocket. Grew up liking the Rocket, and of course used to watch the games with the Rocket when we finally had a TV, and I think I was probably 13 or 14 when that happened. And at that time we would, Dickie Duff playing for Toronto and Frank Mahovlich. But my favorite was probably from the Montreal Canadiens, the Rocket. Of course, I can name you all the players at that era. And then on the Toronto team would be Frank Mahovlich. And as I got a little older, of course, the Golden Jet, Bobby Hill. I would say that would have been, I would have somewhere in my early 30s, I think. And I kind of liked the idea of the authority I seen on the ice, and I took it on. And actually, I was refereeing a little bit of umpiring some baseball. I was refereeing in football, and I got into the hockey. And actually, the very first game I ever officiated was in the Western Hockey League, as I worked as a linesman, when it was then known as the Winnipeg Clubs.
Was it a tough skill to learn?
Was
refereeing a tough skill to learn?
It's not the learning. I'll give you an example. I remember I was refereeing Chief many years later, and I had a young fellow, without saying the name, tremendous skater, knew the rules backwards, looked the part, but I would never put him into a junior A hockey game. He just didn't understand the game. It's understanding the game, and I see that a lot today. Last night I'm watching the Winnipeg Jets play the Washington team. The game had gone over 9 minutes without a stoppage, and the referee called a penalty, and I said, why? You had the players right in your hands. Let them go. I mean, the little slap and all that, let it go. They're not running, they're not harming each other. They're skating, they're playing. Why did you stop the game? And it's understanding the game.
And that's how you watch games? You
yeah.
Still watch games with the referee's mentality?
Oh yeah, as I watch it, my wife, she just loves to watch the Jets play. She got her Jet jersey on TV and whatnot. And I'm probably saying offside before they blow the whistle and stuff like that. And why they call that penalty? What are they doing here? So, yeah, you're probably right. The tough parts were, it's really when you knew the team's coming on the ice and you knew the players that were going to give you the headache. And how did you handle them? I can remember certain players, without saying names, skating around before the ice because I think I had a good reputation with the players, and because I only refereed junior and university and senior hockey. And I remember certain players saying to me, "Say, well, Don, how are you gonna call me tonight?" And I'd say, "Well, if I come by you and I just give you a little tap on the shoulder, that means smarten up. You're getting the end of my rope, okay?" So sometimes just clamping down tight was not the answer. The answer to get the feel for the game, see how it's going to flow, give the players a chance to play. I think it's an inherent skill. Mm-hmm. I think it's something that you learn. You learn. You're either a manager or you're not a manager. You may get the title, but you're not a manager. It was tough. I did most of the lines I worked were probably when I was working in the Western Canada Hockey League. You got to remember back then to play, players had to be 21 before you were drafted. In particular, I can remember then I was refereeing a lot. The Brandon Weekings, and I think it was 1978. I think they had the best hockey team in junior that I ever seen, and even today, they had 10 bona fide NHL players on the team. You know, it had Bonner in goal, you had Prop, Allison, Semenko, DeLegro, McCrimmon, and so on. It was a talented team. But I remember refereeing the series between Regina, Flin Flon, and Brandon. And Brandon actually, if you look at this, in the 160 points that you normally have in a year, they probably had 150 points, just to give you Flin Flon probably had 100. And Regina probably had 50. But Brandon lost 2 games quick for whatever reason. And I remember refereeing, and Brandon either won the game to send to assure that there was another game going to be in Regina. Well, they won the game, and they beat the Flin Flon team. The next night, Flin Flon is playing Regina. And remember, I said 150 points, 150. Regina had to win by, I think it was 11 goals to knock Brandon out. They won by 12. Jordy Douglas played on the Flin Flon team then. He can verify the same story. Basically, they knocked out what I consider the best junior team I ever seen. Lots of players. In the early years, Chipperfield, who played for Brandon. As we went on, of course, one of the younger fellows I admired immensely was Wayne Chernicki. Good friend, but also a tremendous, tremendous athlete. I actually did a referee when Wayne Fleming was playing for the Manitoba Bisons. And he was not in that playing skill, but still, he was a character player. You had, of course, I'm just trying to think of New Westminster Bruins, a number of the players that played there, Barry Beck and the likes of that. And then names escape me just now. I was sort of one of those cocky type guys. I knew as soon as I got going and got the feel of how to referee a hockey game, that sort of the sky was the limit for me. I was lucky enough to work through World Junior Championships in 73, 74 in Winnipeg as a linesman at that time. Gordy Kerr was the referee at the time, referee-in-chief as well. Lou Joyle, both members of the Manitoba Hockey Hall of Fame. And I knew then that I was capable of handling it, as I did for future years. Lou Joyle, when I refereed my very first junior game, that was with the Portage Prairie in Portage. At that time, Lou Joyle was my mentor, and Ab McDonald was behind the bench at Portage. I can't remember the other team at this time. But it was interesting is that, it was my start. Another interesting story about the Portage Prairie team was my nephew Bobby. He was 15 years old. He's going to play with Portage Prairie team in his first game, and I was the referee. Well, he got in a fight, and I ended up kicking him out of the game. And but he fought with one of the tougher guys in hockey. His name was Henry. I can't remember his last name. The second nephew I refereed was his brother Tommy. He played for St. James Canadians. His first game he played, I threw him out of the hockey game. So much the rest of the family members said, I guess there's no family favoritism, is there? I said, no. I refereed the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, the Manitoba Senior Hockey League, and the University League, the Western Canada Hockey League, as it was known there, not the Western League. Those are the primary areas that I worked. In the early years, there was no such thing as a level of officiating. And I was lucky enough to be in the ground floor when they brought in fact, as I was quite active with the Manitoba hockey in developing especially the level 4 certification program within Manitoba. I did a lot of training at it, and then they moved it up to level 5 and level 6. Level 1 gives you introductory hockey to officiate, and you can just take a look at it as like going up to Pee-wee, midget, and so on. Level 6 allows you to referee everything, every type of amateur hockey in Canada. But I also had my level 6, which was international, which allowed me to referee overseas as I did. I refereed when the Winnipeg Jets were doing their training here. I had the luxury of Gordie Howe was playing an exhibition game to officiate in that. Officiate when Bobby Hill and the World Hockey League was playing here. So we used to do their early scrimmage games and club games, but that was about the end of that. Well, the World Championships, like I said, I did in 73, 74. I was involved in the World Junior Championships. Then when it was Peterborough Pete's, played over in Finland and Helsinki. It wasn't really a fair competition at that time because simple reason the European teams had teams that were from the country. And their Peterborough Pete's were the former Memorial Cup Championships that year, and they played. So probably I've refereed several Allen Cup Championships. I refereed up the ladder on the Memorial Cup Championships. I've refereed a number of, most in that era, the finals in the Junior A Championships were over a period of about 10 years' time. There's just so many I did at that time. Goaltenders, I always considered goaltenders to be my friends on the ice because I was of the opinion they're not fair game. You don't run them. They don't run them in the NHL today because that just causes a problem. So I always kept them intact as well as don't let the players get on them. Well, I did in Finland. I did the World Championships with the, like I said, it was the World Junior Championships. This is prior to them. I think it was a year or two later, then they started going with the Canadian team. Then it was the Memorial Cup Championships of the previous years. I did the one in 73, 74, which was, Winnipeg Arena was just packed with people at the time. Then I was, those were the two main ones, okay? Yeah, I did, I worked in 4 Allen Cup Championships, 2 of them in Thunder Bay, a couple in Winnipeg, and the final one in Thunder Bay. They were, back then, senior hockey was probably just getting to the tail end. After that, it kind of diminished off like it is today. There was most players that played at quite an advanced junior or some pro hockey. It was a very tough hockey to be involved in. No, the one that probably was interesting enough to me was when the Montreal team was playing. I think they were playing the Ontario team, and it was important that the to the home team that one team won over the other team for standings. And they're all over me because it went the other way. I don't remember exactly. I think Montreal won, and they didn't want Montreal to win. Wanted Ontario to win because it was better off for this than the Twins hockey organization. I did won the finals for the Hardy Cup, and the same day I did the Hardy Cup, and I flew over to Thunder Bay and did a game that night. Whether you've blown a call, and you do. I mean, you're human. You blow a call, and you inadvertently and you sometimes feel like taking your whistle and wish it was a chocolate bar and eat it. There was always a mutual respect. I remember one particular time I was up in Flin Flon, and Muzz McPherson was the coach up there, and we went into the bar at the end of the first game, and I didn't drink, but he drank quite a bit. But at the end of the next day, I'm skating up and down the ice. He says, "How did you do it? How do you do it? How do you go in the?" I said, "I don't drink." He says, "But you got me drunk." So it was interesting. Well, there were a lot of fun things. There were bench clearing brawls that then you don't see or don't hear about now. A lot in the Western Hockey League. It was back in the era of the, what do you call it, the Philadelphia, when they had the Schultz and all those type of players. Hockey was like that at that time. It was pretty rough. Well, I remember one game, Dunk McCallum was coaching, and we were in Flin Flon again. And I was sitting in my civvies and a tie watching the warm-up. And a brawl broke out. I came downstairs, and Dunk said, and Keating was the coach, Mickey Keating was the coach of the Flin Flon team. And what are you going to do? And, well, I phoned Ed Chanuth up, and I said, "Ed, here's what happened." He said, "What's in the rule book?" I said, "At that time, there was nothing about a brawl before the game." Well, needless to say, everybody played. They weren't happy with me. They thought this guy should be thrown or that. Well, no, we didn't throw it, but it was, you might say, it was quite a fisty game after that. Did I have any words with Dunk McCallum? I never had words with any coach. They might have not liked what you did at the time, but I never had words. I didn't stoop to that level. Again, it's having a feel for the game. You sort of had to keep your eye on certain players because, not the reputation. I don't never like to hear what somebody else said. I wanted to hear what I would witness. And so you sometimes, keep them in check. Not a game to remember. It was very difficult. There was the setters there and so on. I almost felt like I was set up to walk into a situation that was coming no matter who walked on that ice.
And did you sense that in other games sometimes that you knew there's some animosity between teams? And
as soon as you walked on the ice, it was there. You knew. I can't remember the exact year, but I remember I was referee in chief at the time, and so I went up to the meeting with the general managers, I think it was Frank McKinnon was the head guy at the time, the commissioner of the Junior Hockey League, and I said, "We are going to change this hitting from behind rule." I really said, if we don't change it, find somebody else to do it, because I don't want to be part of somebody that's going to see somebody crippled. And what we instituted that year, was before Christmas. So this wasn't done at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. It was done during these. I says, we will have a major penalty for hitting from behind and a game misconduct, regardless of the time of the game. If it's later, I suggested in the last 5 minutes, it's that game plus the next game. The league backed me. That year, the Manitoba Major Junior League, Manitoba teams, they jumped in. and so did the Manitoba Amateur Hockey League jump in, and slowly but right across Canada. I take pride that that was something that I instigated, and I'm proud of it. Nothing's worse, and I still got the video at home, when young Horning boy was hit in Regina from behind, and he became a quadriplegic, pardon me, and he's since passed on. We don't need that in our life. Nobody needs that. It's only a game. It's only a game.
Years.
Size of players, speed, the conditioning. It's, you go to like, I remember they interviewed Schultz, who played for the Philadelphia Flyers. He said, I was a big tough guy back then. He says, I was only 180 pounds. He says, I would be a peewee out there now. You got players now, you just take a look at the Jet lineup. I was looking at it, and I think they only have one player that's under 5'10", the Swedish defenseman, and then I think one player that's under 6 feet. Probably the average height, if you take those two out of the equation, are probably 6'2", 6'3". They skate like the wind, are strong. The conditioning and the size of the players is probably the most. Yes, you can say the sticks and all that, but that goes without saying. They would hit that puck just as hard if they had a wood stick in their hand. Well, now they've gone to a two-man system. Okay, if you let's refer to in the pro level, because then it's slipping downward. They've gone to a two-man system, which I personally don't like. They're trying to make the game exact. And I often said, if they want to make it that exact, why don't they just put cameras at the blue lines, have an automatic, just like they do in tennis. You don't have to have anybody blowing a whistle there. Have half a dozen officials in the crowd that can just press a button saying there's a penalty, nobody on the ice. So somebody, just robots picking up the puck and dropping it. I think they've tried to make it too perfect. It's a game of mistakes, both by players and officials and coaches. And I think when you start making it too exact, I think you take the human element, and I think you somewhat spoil the game. No. I walked away from it when I was finished. Actually, the last game I was involved with the league was in 1997. Then I was given the dubious task by the government to oversee the flood of '97, the flood of the century, and I had a major responsibility there. And it was when the playoffs were starting. And I passed the torch on, if you remember, to the late Perry Allen.